internal processes, it's a really, really profound change.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if I hear from him or anybody else about that.
Well, I've thought about that.
Yeah.
What would that be like?
Welcome to On the JoB with your host, Lynn Parrish, editor of the Journal of Business. On the JoB is about the Inland Northwest business community, where you'll hear firsthand the backstories from the men and women reporters at the Journal of Business. On the JoB is brought to you in part by McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Here's Lynn.
Hi, welcome to the On the JoB podcast. I'm Lynn Parrish, editor of the Journal of Business. I'm here today with Kevin Blocker, and we're going to be talking about foreclosures and home sales and a lot of interesting things like that, a lot of numbers. Before we get into it, though, I want to give a plug to our redesign effort. Our paper came out today, February 1st, and we've undergone a redesign over the last few months, and this is our first issue with that. So when you get your paper, if you're a subscriber, check it out and let us know what you think. And if you're not a subscriber, pick one up and see what we're doing. So that's my pitch. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well, Lynn.
Good,
Thank you.
good. Let's talk about your story that was on page 3 this time about home sales and foreclosures. A lot of numbers.
Lots of numbers.
Lots of interesting stats.
Compliments of Rob Higgins at the Spokane Realtors Association.
Sure.
And it was a very, very fascinating research, the numbers that the association has compiled. We can all remember, the time, well, those of us who are around, we can remember that time before the Great Recession. Things were going well.
Mm-hmm.
The recession hit, and the economy is just off the cliff. And now we're seeing a rise in home sales. We're seeing plummeting foreclosures. Last year, foreclosures in Spokane County numbered 464 total.
Sure.
And that's down from a record high of 1,200 plus at about 2011, 2012.
Sure.
So the evidence is clearly showing that there is a great turnaround going on, and I think that listening to Rob talk, I think there was a mild surprise at just how quickly the turnaround has occurred.
Sure. Now, we're down from the high, the historic high from the early 2010s, basically. How do the numbers this year compare to 2000s, or the numbers for 2017 compare with the numbers from 2016?
The numbers of foreclosures?
Foreclosures, yeah.
They continue to trend downward.
Mm-hmm.
They've been trending downward well, I take that back. They are down 17 from 16.
Sure.
464 in 17, 724, 725 in 16. That was, they took a little bit of an uptick from 15 to 16.
Right.
But that was the first incline since they had started coming down in about 2011, 2012.
Sure.
So the 68% drop from 16 to 17, that's a pretty precipitous drop in foreclosures. Just, another sign that things are going well, that the economy is strengthening.
Right, and I remember the increase from 2015 to 2016 being a little bit of a head scratcher for us, because even at that time, the housing market was strong in terms of sales. We saw some appreciation, so we weren't really sure where that came from, but we've certainly seen that correct itself and then some over this past year.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Now, what would you say is the primary factor in that decline in foreclosures?
I spoke with Grant Forsythe at Avista, and at the top of, there were 4 things that he identified. Number one, you can say a strengthening economy, that's obvious, but what is fueling the strengthening economy? return in jobs, and an increase in salaries for residents.
Sure.
So that added income back into the household is a huge driver. So you pay your bills. Guess what? These foreclosures are going to, they're going to drop.
They're going to become less frequent. Sure, sure. And of the economic indicators we look at, foreclosures is always one that always felt intensely personal to me. We're talking about people losing their homes,
Right.
And any equity that they might have had in those homes at some point. So it's really good to see those numbers declining. We touched on home sales a little bit, so let's just talk about what has happened in home sales over the past year.
Certainly. Again, a strengthening economy is fueling the purchase of homes.
Sure.
In large part, again, going back to employment.
Mhm.
People are back to work. Unemployment is low. Wages are higher. The two those two markers correlate very well with each other.
Sure.
Very strong indicator. Rob Higgins projects, the Realtors Association is projecting, that home sales in 2018 are going to be at an all-time high for Spokane County.
Sure.
All-time high, that was, again, pre-Great Recession in 2005. I can't remember the exact number, but that was when Spokane County hit an all-time high. We go back to the recession in 2011. Home sales in Spokane County were just a little bit above 4,000, which, according to Rob, that was a 30-year low.
Mm-hmm.
So you think that in the span of 7 years, am I doing the math right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a span of 7 years, in 2005, Spokane County hit an all-time high. It hit a 30-year low, and in 7 short years is ready to eclipse its previous all-time high.
Sure.
That's rapid turnaround.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and one of the more interesting sets of facts that you had in your story was the coupling of increased home sales with the percentage of those sales that were foreclosed upon homes. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Definitely. Prior to 2011, Mr. Higgins told me that the Realtors Association had never tallied the number of home sales that came from foreclosures. That number had been, so minuscule throughout the history of the county that there was just no need to tabulate it. Suddenly, here's this recession, and they began to take a look at, okay, of these homes that are selling, what percentage are coming from foreclosures? In 2011, it was the figure exceeded, 20%. It was 22%.
Right.
Of 4,000 plus homes that were from foreclosures.
So 1 in 5 homes, between 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 homes that sold during 2011 had been foreclosed upon. It was a house that someone else had lost.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Today, that figure is now down to just a little bit above 4%.
Right.
So again, we're seeing home sales do this, and the graph will show online in the hard copy of the paper.
Sure.
Home sales are doing this. Those foreclosed homes that are being purchased are doing this.
Right. In terms of their percentage. Well, that's fascinating. Okay, so here's my question. As someone who built a house around the peak of the last housing boom, 2007, when I hear about appreciation in homes, when I hear about hitting record number of home sales, I picture us heading for another decline in the coming years. What are you seeing, or what are your sources saying about the possibility of another housing bubble in the Spokane market?
I asked that very question, and that is our reference point.
Sure.
That is what we knew. Well, if it's going up, then it's going to come down. Grant Forsythe made an excellent point. The banking regulations and restrictions that are in place as a result of the bubble that occurred are still there.
Mm-hmm.
What we aren't seeing here is, let's just say it, irresponsible lending.
Sure.
That's just not taking place here. My sense is across the country that it's not taking place in very many locations.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Higgins made the point that developers here are still leery, still a little bit gun shy. There's no spec building taking place in Spokane. You aren't seeing tract housing being laid down from one end of the county to the other.
Not like the volume we saw in the 2004, 2005,
Exactly.
2006 era.
Exactly.
Sure.
We are in a place where the market is tight in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't an overbuild that's taking place. Grant indicated it was his perspective that I would say, growth 18, possible leveling off in 19, but barring anything foreseen, that's on the landscape right now, there isn't an anticipation that we're going to come crashing back down to earth the way that we did in 2005, 2006.
It sounds like the growth is a little bit more sustainable than maybe it was in the late 2000s.
Sustainable, and I think a better word is responsible.
Mm-hmm.
In speaking with an individual for a separate story,
Sure.
Related to banking and finance, he was, sharing with me anecdotally that in the past decade, so much of what he has done has been just based on his time and attention has been spent with regards to regulations. Now we've got a new administration in place that has shown signs of loosening up some of these regulations, but by and large, banks are not, I remember in the early 2000s getting pre-approval letters for homes that I couldn't afford. And
Sure.
I remember thinking, do these people know that I'm a newspaper reporter? Let's just go ahead and put this in the recycle bin. You don't see that anymore. At least I don't get that in my mail. Maybe you do, I don't know. But we're just in a different time, and that's still very pervasive.
Yeah, great. Well, lots of good stuff in that story. A lot of good numbers, and as you mentioned, some graphics that help really paint the picture for that. It was interesting. We had a story from another reporter, Samantha Pione, about construction volume in Spokane County, in the city, Spokane Valley, and Spokane County, setting an all-time record in terms of permit volume in 2017. So clearly we have a couple of different things in force that are bode well for our community and our economy.
Yeah, bode well. Like I said, I think we talk about the word sustainability. Has been kicked around a lot. I think that what we're really seeing is responsible growth. It is not, it's not out of hand. It's not over. It's not unwieldy. It's growth that is kind of justified and based on the need of what residents want.
Yeah, great. Well, good stuff, Kevin. Thanks for joining me today.
My
I appreciate
pleasure.
it.
My pleasure.
And thanks for watching On the JoB with me and Kevin. Have a great rest of your day.
On the JoB is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. On the JoB is brought to you by our friends at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Ask Lynn a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com.